The order arrived not with a bang, but with the crisp, clean sound of a federal rubber stamp hitting paper. They didn't use guns. They used post-it notes and bureaucratic language. Relocation, a clinical corporate term for the sudden, absolute annihilation of life, as 120,000 people knew it. Think about that brutal reversal of reality. You are American. You own a dry cleaner, you sell fresh fish, your children speak flawless English, you pay your taxes, but suddenly your citizenship means less than the racial category stamped onto your file. You are alien. You are contraband. This wasn't some isolated rogue act of hatred carried out in a dark corner of the country by a few extremists. This was codified evil, signed by the president himself, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the architect of hope, the champion of the common man. Executive Order 9066 didn't just target supposed spies or saboteurs. It targeted entire generations of human beings based solely on the shape of their eyes, ripping them out of California, Washington, Oregon, and Arizona, shuffling them into dusty, barbed wire cages constructed specifically to contain them. Historians often explain this horror away as simple wartime panic, the natural, if regrettable, fear following the attack on Pearl Harbor. They call it pragmatic. They even call it inevitable. I call that analysis spineless. I call that journalistic cowardice designed to avoid the real, uncomfortable terror lurking beneath the surface. The camps were never fundamentally about Japanese espionage. That is the comfortable, sterilized lie we allow to persist in textbooks. The reality is profoundly darker, rooted deep within the collective psyche of a nation desperate to believe in its own inherent, perfect virtue. We imprisoned them because they served as the perfect, unwelcome mirror. We didn't hate the Japanese. We hated what they reflected back to us about ourselves. We saw in them the very fragility, the very potential for chaos, and the potential for deep, corrosive disloyalty that secretly haunted every white American citizen afraid of the Great Depression, afraid of Europe collapsing, afraid of their own ultimate failure. We saw the enemy outside. It was us all along, our own repressed suspicion, our own staggering capacity for state-sanctioned mass cruelty. This, truly, is the Jungian shadow manifesting at the level of national policy, a country projecting its darkest, most volatile, most anti-democratic parts onto a convenient, visible, ethnic other. If you find the official narrative too neat, too easily digestible, if you feel that intellectual itch that insists the real answers always live beneath the surface noise, then you belong right here. We excavate the hidden mechanisms of history, even when they indict the comfortable myths we hold most dear. Now, consider the sheer, terrifying logistics of Manzanar, of Tule Lake, of Poston. They were concentration camps, stripped of the gas chambers, yes, but retaining the essential cruelty. The systematic removal of identity, the destruction of property, the imposition of pointless, soul-crushing routine designed to break the spirit. Ponder the guards, the camp managers, the people who implemented this policy. They weren't mythical monsters flown in from another planet. They were neighbors. They were ordinary men who clocked in at 9, supervised the armed sentries, and went home to their wives to barbecue hot dogs. That is the genuine nightmare scenario, isn't it? The cold, casual, American normalization of atrocity. It did not take a Hitler or a vast alien conspiracy to accomplish this. It just took one president, a few pens, and a quiet, chilling consensus that certain people were, definitionally, less American than others. The foundational fear wasn't about invasion. It was about the power of definition itself. Who gets to decide who is worthy of the Bill of Rights? The answer 1942 delivered was terrifyingly, brutally transient. It told us the Constitution is not a shield. It is a suggestion, easily withdrawn when panic requires a scapegoat. The most insidious weapon used against these families wasn't the bayonet. It was the questionnaire. Loyalty tests administered by the very government that had just stolen everything they owned. The questionnaire was the kill switch. Total psychological warfare administered by cheap pencil and mimeographed paper. Questions 27 and 28. They haunt the history of American loyalty. Look at them closely. Question 27. Will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States and defend it against all attacks? Sounds perfectly reasonable. Until you remember the context, the people reading that question were already imprisoned. Their property was seized, their livelihoods vaporized, their freedom abolished by the very government demanding this oath. Swearing unqualified allegiance was a demand to forget the betrayal, to accept the cage as a necessary normal state of being. It was a psychological death sentence packaged as patriotism. Now, question 28. This is the real knife twist, the true stroke of engineered malice. It asked the Nisei, the American-born citizens, if they would renounce any and all allegiance to the Emperor of Japan. Wait, renounce an allegiance they had never, could never, possess? They were Americans by birth. This question didn't just test loyalty, it forced them to accept the government's foundational racist premise about their identity. Say yes, and you implicitly admit you were secretly disloyal all along, which retroactively justifies the camp. Say no, and you are officially declared disloyal, a threat, and sentenced to the maximum security hellhole, segregation center. The trap snapped shut either way. No escape. This wasn't accidental bureaucracy. It was cruelty engineered by petty clerks and authorized by generals. Ponder that bureaucratic sadism for a long minute. The government didn't need their answers. It needed their submission. It needed the humiliating, painful act of performing loyalty to prove the inherent, manufactured lack of it. The people who answered no on the questionnaire, the ones who refused to perform this farce, they weren't the traitors. They were, in that moment, the most honest Americans in the whole damn country. They understood the definition of tyranny better than the men signing the executive orders. This realization, this deep, unsettling truth hidden beneath 70 years of sanitized history, is the only quarry we chase here. If you prefer the raw, unsettling reality over the polished lie, if your brain demands intellectual excavation even when the findings indict comfortable myths, then this space is built for you. You belong with the skeptics, the questioners, the ones who insist on seeing the whole bloody picture. The costs of the camps weren't just psychological devastation. The economic annihilation was total. Zeroed out. Think about the logistics of that destruction. When the war finally ended, the internees were handed $25 and a train ticket. That was the official stipend. That's it. Go rebuild your life. Go find the family farm we auctioned off for pennies. Go retrieve the dental practice we liquidated while you were gone. The true bill for this national crime runs into the tens of billions of dollars today, factoring in lost property, lost wages, and lost potential. But the government paid pennies. A single, inadequate, performative apology check arrived decades later, barely enough to cover the interest on their lost wealth, certainly not the principal. This wasn't justice. This was an insult draped in political theater, a pathetic attempt to buy historical quiet. But the greatest betrayal, the thing that truly seals the crime, isn't what happened in 1942. It's how the American apparatus chose to remember it. Or, more accurately, how it refuses to truly internalize it. We treat the internment as a single, isolated mistake. Never a crime. Never a logical, inevitable endpoint of defining citizenship by race and proximity to power. But the historical record screams the opposite, doesn't it? The Supreme Court shamefully backed it up. Korematsu versus United States. A decision so morally corrosive, so profoundly racist in its application of military necessity over fundamental rights, that it took nearly 40 years for the court to finally, weakly, repudiate the underlying conviction. Ponder that lag. 40 years for the system to correct its own moral compass. But even then, the core, toxic principle that the state can strip citizens of all rights based on their identity during an undefined emergency, that seed remains planted deep in the American soil. The government never truly apologized for the principle, only for the messy, embarrassing execution. We are told the camp era was an aberration, a momentary lapse of reason, in a time of fear. That is the lie used to maintain comfort. The reality is that the Japanese internment was the ultimate distilled expression of the perpetual American conflict. The conflict between the promise of the Constitution and the reality of power concentrated in the hands of people terrified of difference. What the camps proved was that the rule of law is not a rigid structure. It's a thin, easily punctured membrane. And when that membrane breaks, it is always the minority groups who are left choking on the fumes of national panic. They became a cautionary tale, but not for the government. They became a warning to every other non-white group. Your rights are temporary. They are alone. And we reserve the right to call them due at any moment. That is the lesson they carried out of the camps with their $25. We need to remember that warning far more clearly than we remember the flimsy, self-serving apology that followed. They walked out of those barbed wire gates into a world that demanded their silence. You cannot deny it. They carried their trauma like heavy luggage, invisible to the rest of America, which was already busy celebrating victory and conveniently forgetting the concentration camps it had run on its own. Ruined lives, lost years. But the deepest scar? The profound humiliation. They were proven, definitively, to be less than fully American, less than fully entitled to their own fundamental rights. The shame was not put back onto the government that instituted the horror. It settled squarely onto the victims. Why? Because quiet suffering is easier for the majority to process than loud, demanding accountability. It always is. The unspoken requirement placed upon the internees was this: absorb the injustice, rebuild quietly, and never, ever make us feel uncomfortable about what we did. That was the hidden price of freedom, wasn't it? That was the psychological contract signed with the state, an invisible document of compliance drafted in fear. Think about the children raised in the decades after. They learned two things instantly: be invisible and never truly trust the promise of the state. That is a heavy, terrible burden to place on a people, a soul-crushing weight. If you refuse the cheap comfort of historical revisionism, if you demand truth over soothing narratives, you belong in this space. We have work to do, dismantling these generational lies one by one. Now, understand the mechanics of the eventual apology itself. It was engineered forgetfulness. The redress payments were laughably small, a pittance for lost years, lost potential, lost faith. The apology felt like a legalistic maneuver, not an actual reckoning. It was the state buying back its own moral debt at a steep discount. The mechanism they built was simple: pay them just enough to stop them suing, but not enough to admit the foundational principle was wrong. Called it healing. I call it strategic damage control, purely theatrical. They never rescinded the core idea, that principle that allows a government to detain its own citizens without due process based on fear and identity. The legal precedent still lingers, a dormant virus in the body politic, waiting for the right environmental conditions to reactivate. I sincerely doubt any politician today, facing real geopolitical pressure and manufactured panic, would hesitate to dust off those old playbooks. They are right there on the shelf. The precedent is clean. What happens when the next national panic hits? What group suddenly looks different, sounds suspicious, or holds economic power that makes the majority uncomfortable? You don't need barbed wire next time. You just need data centralization and a compliant surveillance state. The technology has simply improved the efficiency of the moral rot. We should stop talking about the internment as a unique historical artifact and start viewing it as the blueprint. It is the instruction manual for modern administrative tyranny. You want to see the future of identity-based discrimination in America? Look at the ghosts of Manzanar. Look closer. Their story wasn't a warning about what we might do. It was a precise, documented demonstration of what we will do when panic outweighs principle. And we, the public, have been trained to accept the official story. That it was bad, yes, but that we learned our lesson. Nonsense. We learned only how to apologize while keeping the weapons loaded. The true lesson is that civil liberties are always the first casualty of manufactured war hysteria. And they are surrendered not by revolution, but by a chilling, quiet consensus. The moment we define American safety by exclusion rather than inclusion, the ghosts return. They always do. You think that principle died on the dusty floor of the Supreme Court? It just went underground. It mutated. It became smarter. It waits. It became smarter. It waits. This wasn't just a military or legislative failure. It was a profound psychological reckoning that America failed. This is the mechanism of the Jungian shadow made manifest. The enemy they feared abroad, the treacherous, inscrutable other, was simply the reflection of the betrayal they were capable of enacting domestically. The camps were never about Japanese loyalty. Never. They were about America's pathological need to purge its own perceived weakness and guilt by projecting it onto a visible minority. When you build a barbed wire city, you are not securing the perimeter. You are desperately trying to wall off the national conscience, trying to contain the terrifying truth that you are capable of monstrous hypocrisy. You are the monster you claim to be fighting. You are the villain. The American narrative requires clean heroes, clean endings, and clean mistakes. The internment, therefore, must be filed under tragic mistake committed by fallible men during duress. I sincerely doubt that narrative. This wasn't a mistake. This was structural capacity revealed. It was the purest expression of the fundamental American insecurity. The fear that the promise of the Constitution is a lie, contingent upon skin color and geopolitical climate. The moment the climate changes, the promise dissolves. That is the horror. We apologized not because we were suddenly morally enlightened, but because the war ended and we needed the official record to look pristine. The apology was damage control for the national ego, a psychological cleanup operation designed to put the shadow back in the closet without actually dealing with the monster inside. Look closely at the documentation of that era. Observe the chilling efficiency of the logistics, the cool administrative language used to strip away personhood. That language is still being taught. That legal principle still breathes. It just has better servers now. They don't need to put you on a train anymore. They just need to turn off your digital access, freeze your assets, and define you as a non-person using algorithms based on predictive fear profiling. The ghosts of Manzanar are teaching us the ultimate truth about administrative evil. It is not loud, not revolutionary. It is quiet, procedural, and entirely legal. It is polite tyranny. The verdict on the Japanese internment is simple, absolute, and final. It was not an aberration we overcame, but a foundational, structural reality we simply repress until the next moment of collective hysteria demands its return. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights. These documents are not chains that restrain the state. They are merely polite suggestions that the state ignores the moment it feels truly threatened. Your liberty is always negotiable. It is conditional. This is the chilling, quiet consensus that defines modern America. We choose comfort over confrontation, safety over savagery. We accept the official lie because the truth that the capacity for tyranny is inherent in our governance and our own hearts is simply too devastating to carry every day. We were not warned by Manzanar. We were simply shown our own future. The principle did not die. It went silent, it mutated, and it waits for the precise moment when the American public, in a fit of manufactured panic, asks its government for the absolute security that only absolute control can provide. And when that moment arrives, the camps will return. They will look different, certainly, but the logic will be identical. We will define safety by exclusion, and the enemy will not be a foreign power. It will be the American looking back from the glass, refusing to see the darkness. The barbed wire is not around them. It is around us. We treat Manzanar like a history lesson. Wrong. It's an instruction manual. We look back and say, they did this. We never say, we did this. This distinction is the core of our national psychosis. The administrative blueprint for mass dehumanization is not something we retired. It is a tool kept sharpened, stored right next to the Constitution, waiting for the precise political climate to justify its immediate, efficient use. The true horror is not that the state can turn against its own citizens. The horror is that the citizens, in their desperate need for order, demand it. They crave the simplicity of a defined enemy, a projection for the national shadow. That is the verdict. The camps were not imposed on America from the outside. They burst forth, fully formed, from the repressed, fearful, brutal core of the American collective unconscious. We interned the other, because we could not bear to look at the darkness within ourselves. The system merely facilitated our moral cowardice. It is the ultimate act of psychological warfare waged by the self upon the self. You are begging for tyranny the moment you prioritize security above all else. You are trading your soul for a slightly better sense of safety, and the bureaucracy is always there, politely taking inventory. You cannot destroy the shadow by locking it away. You can only destroy it by claiming it. But look around. We refuse. We demand the comforting lie that those days are over, that we have evolved past such cruelty. We have not. We have merely relocated the barbed wire. The physical camps are gone, yes, but the concentration of American fear, suspicion, and administrative arrogance now resides inside every algorithm, every surveillance camera, and every law passed in the name of absolute protection. The ultimate question you must answer is not whether the government can build the next camp, but whether you, looking in the mirror, are still ready to volunteer for guard duty. The gates open from the inside. They always have. The verdict is simple. The American system did not fail. It performed exactly as designed. It successfully outsourced our collective pathology. This is not history repeating. This is history revealing itself. The barbed wire remains, woven into the fabric of our psyche. Until we own the ugliness, until we claim the shadow, the gates will continue to swing open, greeting the next victim you deem necessary. Look at your hands. We are the keepers of the